Good morning. We are live on YouTube, but we want to be live on Facebook as well. Atlanta Falcons fans on all Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports. So we'll bring everybody in here so we can talk some Atlanta Falcons football on a soggy Monday morning. And welcome in, everybody. I am Scott Kennedy. I am your host for the Falcons Podcast on this Monday, August 7th. We are in game week, if you can believe that. It's here already. So I know it seems like it drags on, but then you blink twice and it's already game week. The Falcons will be traveling to Miami today for their joint practices with the Miami Dolphins, and then they will be taking on the Dolphins in preseason on Saturday. This isn't the first year the Falcons and Dolphins have hooked up. I think they did it 2 years ago, maybe. I think it was 2 years ago they were down in Miami because I happen to remember Calvin Ridley on making a highlight play, and that was kind of his highlight for the 2021 season, so to speak. But he's back down in Florida. Hopefully he has a decent year and helps get that Falcons that second round draft pick. Some of the folks, some of the things I want to talk about today. I want to talk some Jeff Okudah. I want to talk some of the personnel moves that have been made. There were 4 made last week. Some a little bit surprising. Maybe the timing, not so much the personnel. I want to talk, let's see, what else did I want to hit on? Oh, some, who leads? Some camp notes. The ESPN guys, Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler, had a huge camp notebook. And it's always nice to see kind of an outsider's perspective when they come in and see things. And nice to see them getting on the road instead of just saying, oh, yeah, Desmond Ridder, they can't play. Okay, well, why don't you go watch Desmond Ridder and see what they think about Desmond Ridder, et cetera, and see how things are going. And that's about it. Then we'll hit the chat, obviously. We do this live because I want to know what y'all want to talk about. Otherwise, I'm just sitting here monologuing, which isn't nearly as much fun. So while Facebook and YouTube are going out and finding everybody with their alerts and stuff, let's say hello to some folks that have come in nice and early, including Michael Ronquillo out in Tucson. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. I am expecting Nick back on Mondays next week. We got football. It's time for Nick to come back on Mondays. That includes Broncos for breakfast, returning to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday format, and then Nick being back on Monday, Wednesday with the Falcons podcast. I'll continue to be here. I'll be back here on Wednesday as well. That will not change. John Harrell says, good morning, Scott and the Falcons family. Good morning, John. Appreciate you being here. And Alan says, good morning, everyone. Nice sunshiny morning in South Georgia. Everything down here is wet. Yeah, it's going to be a muggy day. Can't wait to go cut the grass today. I didn't cut it yesterday because I didn't feel like dodging the thunderstorms. So it's going to be a little muggy out there today. I'll get that done this afternoon. Sent the kids off to school this morning, first day of school. It still seems tough to go back this early, but shoot, they get out in the 20s of May. And then they hardly do any 5-day weeks anymore. They may not have back-to-back 5-day weeks, but twice all school year long. So they get a lot more breaks during the year. I think I'd rather do that. Besides, I always said I'd just soon get out earlier and go back in August because it's too damn hot to be outside in August in the South anyway. Might as well get some nice public school air conditioning while you're back there. Zach Powers says, good morning. Good morning to you as well. And you know what? That's a pretty good time. He's got the coffee emoji up there. Mine was too hot, so hopefully it's cooled down just a little bit. Some Lion coffee from Patrick Wiltsey, one of our caffeine sponsors. Michael Lewitzki has been good enough to send us some coffee from Puerto Rico as well. And that's too strong. I know how to cool it off. I'm going to put a little more water into it. Roger Cook coming in from across the pond. He says, afternoon, everyone. He's coming in from an afternoon time slot for sure. Bobby Carter. Good morning, Bobby. He says, good morning, Falcons. One Nation Underground says, how's Ridder looking? We'll get into that for sure. That's something else we will definitely talk about. And welcome in. That feels like a newer name coming in. I feel like I'd recognize that tiger. I can never remember. I always want to call it an avatar that you've got there because, tiger's my favorite animal. I went to Auburn. I should be able to remember the tiger. Bubba Gump, welcome in. He's got the red and the black going. Out of Your Falcon Mind podcast coming in. He says, happy Monday, Scott. We made it. It is Falcon football this week. Yes, it is. Looking forward to, and that could be one of the things we'll finish the show with. So keep that in mind. What are you most looking forward to? Remind me, because that's one of the things I want to talk about. Harry Marshall Wood coming in says, good morning on Facebook, breaking the ice on Facebook. Greg Elrod, good morning, Scott. Good way to start the week. It is. They're playing Miami Friday, actually. Okay, it is Friday. You are absolutely right, 10 Cam. I was looking at Colts this morning. They are playing on Saturday. Mixed them up. They do play Friday. Thank you for that. I was like, it seems like a little early to go down for just 2 joint practices. So thank you. It's even earlier. We get to watch them on Friday. Let me see here. Oh, and One Nation Underground, he came in. He says, Bengals Bearcats Ritter fan and subscriber to this channel. Well, thank you. We try and offer a little bit for everything. Most of our live stuff revolves around the Atlanta Falcons. But hopefully you've seen some of the Senior Bowl stuff I do and that type of stuff as well. Chris Walker coming in says, good morning, Scott, and everybody else. So excited that football is almost back. And Dave McAllister says, a Princeton Tiger. Dave is a friend of mine who has a son up at Princeton, and he gave me a good scouting report on Andre, the Princeton track guy who came down. And Dave is a former quarterback at Ohio State. So when he talks, I listen. So welcome in, Dave. Appreciate you being here. First thing I wanted to lead off was Jeff Okudah. It was a little bit scary last week when he went down, and he's battled some injury problems through the past, including a 2021 Achilles tear. I didn't follow Jeff Okudah in 2021, didn't realize or remember at least that's what he went down from. It's like, well, and he had a pretty good 2022 if he was even decent coming back from a torn Achilles tendon. That is a tough one to come back from. That's as bad as an ACL or something along those lines. It's at least a year. So when they're saying now ankle, non-ligament, back for the beginning of the season, that's all we're going to say, or at least, not the first game, but at least early on in the season. That says to me one of two things, and the diagnosis is usually the same, either a broken ankle or a high ankle sprain. And frankly, as long as there's no ligament damage, the recovery on both of those is almost identical, 4 to 6 weeks. So we are 4 weeks out from 4 weeks out from game 1 of the season. They said he could be back early in the season. This is just me hearing things and going through injuries myself and being around the sport a long time, is high ankle sprain or broken ankle. Recovery on that is typically 4 to 6 weeks, but it's usually a pretty clean recovery. It's not, a lot of extra work that has to be in where it can linger for a long time. I would rather have, sometimes a high ankle sprain can be worse, but I would rather have a broken ankle than a really bad hamstring pull that could linger for the rest of the year, and you're always worried about it. These things heal. They're saying they expect Jeffrey Okudah to be back, so there shouldn't be too many, knock on wood, complications with that, if that's what it is. But that's what my ear hears when I hear them say beginning of the season, ankle, high ankle sprain, broken ankle, 4 to 6 weeks recovery time on both of those. So hopefully those are no surgery involved, and hopefully he does well, because I think obviously we all have our favorite players and whatnot, but we're all rooting for Atlanta Falcons. But the Jeff Okudah is someone we really want to see. You kind of root for the underdog, and he was a number 3 overall pick. How big of an underdog is he? But he's come down here, 5th round pick. I think they're picking up half his salary in Detroit. That he needs a redemption tale of sorts, and where better than to come do this here and then go get an 8-figure contract. And when I say 8 figures, I mean 8 figures, because even if it was a 1-year deal, a legit number 2, possibly number 1 somewhere else, is worth $10 million in a year. So hopefully he can come out and he makes the Falcons decide, oh goodness, how are we going to be able to afford him? I'd love for him to play like that this year. And it sounds like it's still a possibility. Harry Marshall Wood said, knocking on myself. Yes, Wood. Knocking on the forehead. Let me see here. D'Angelo Jones, been active on the Facebook comments page. And I've seen yours, D'Angelo, so I've gotten a chance to come in and respond for some. Obviously, I run the Atlanta Falcons page. I run the Scott Kennedy Sports. Sometimes I respond back with one or the other. Hopefully you know who it is that way, who you're talking to, and you've got an idea of who's actually responding. But D'Angelo says, let's go Falcons. Is it too much to ask? I say Ritter should throw for 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and that Falcons first-round draft pick should have more yards than Algier. I don't think that's too much to ask at all, D'Angelo. I agree with you 100%. 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. That's just a shade over 200 yards per game. 205, maybe 17 times 5 is 85. So 207, call it 207 yards per game. That's not too much to ask. I don't believe that at all. 20 touchdowns in 17 games is just a shade over 1 touchdown per game. No, that's not too much to ask from your starting quarterback either. Now, if they're running the ball at will and they run for, all these yards, and of course the caveat here obviously is always the same. If you stay healthy, I always want to say that. I never want to say that because it should be understood, but yes, you got to play all these games for that to happen. You got to stay healthy, which isn't a given. But no, 200 yards per game and a little over a touchdown per game is not too much to ask from Desmond Ridder and this quarterback. I think we should expect that from Desmond Ridder. Falcons first-round draft pick, Bijan Robinson, should have more yards than Algier. I agree with that too. If you don't, why did you take him with the number 8 pick? We've talked about this a lot, and the cost-benefit of a first-round draft pick kind of goes out the window if you take a running back in the first round. The longevity of having a first-round draft pick for 10, 12 years, the possibility of doing that and having a Jake Matthews, a Matt Ryan, a Chris Lindstrom, what you're looking for. When you sign A.J. Terrell to his next contract, to Julio Jones, that kind of goes out the window too with a running back. I looked it up yesterday, and there were 2 running backs in the top 25 that were 28 years old. It was Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones from the Packers. Every single other running back in the NFL in the top 25 was 27 or younger. So you lose that longevity of, I can get a franchise type player at this position. That said, the point on that, D'Angelo, is you need to get an early return from your running back. You need to get an early return. Oh, well, if you split carries, you could probably carry out his career longer. Yeah, maybe. But when you take, they called Kyle Pitts a win now draft pick, which just drove me nuts because the Falcons were so far away from winning now, it was ridiculous. Bijan Robinson is a win now draft pick. That's a guy that we say we want to go from 7 wins, and we see ourselves as playoff contenders this year. And he's going to help us get there. I agree with that. I think the Falcons are a playoff contender this year. And I think Bijan Robinson should be the leading yards from scrimmage guy on this team. That doesn't mean Tyler Algier won't have a big role to play. I think Tyler Algier can still go over 1,000 yards from scrimmage and be a wonderful 1-2 punch with the Joker, the X factor being Cordell Patterson, the slash man coming in, getting 5 to 6 carries out of the backfield, getting 5 to 6 touches as a wide receiver, maybe a kick returner every now and then, and just getting him 10 to 12 touches per game as well. And you've got some serious weaponry out of the backfield. So I think that's a great comment, D'Angelo. I agree with you 100% on both of those points. Ryan Adonis comes in. He says, I think the Falcons have plenty of guys to play the number 2 cornerback Scott. Watch out for Trey Flowers too. I think he could play the number 2. And Mike Hughes. And you've got some versatility there with Clark Phillips, who has done nothing but make plays as a 4th round pick, I believe, 4th round pick out of Utah, Pac-12 player of the year. Pac-12. What's the Pac-12, Dad? Oh, it's this conference that out west that nobody really paid attention to other than Oregon and USC, and they kind of dissolved and went other places. That's another story somewhere else. But yes, there are options here. There are depth. And Ryan, this is one of those players we talked about earlier when we're looking at battles in the roster battles. We kind of pencil in Jeff Okudah, but I pencil him in, and I don't write him in Sharpie like I do A.J. Terrell and I write in Jesse Bates. Those guys are in Sharpie when I'm writing out my team sheet. Richie Grant and Jeff Okudah were in pencil. It's theirs right now, pre-injury, but they've got to earn it and hold on and fight off some guys that are coming after him. Isn't it nice to have some depth? Not, oh yeah, we picked up Cornell Armstrong off of the waiver wire in week 7, and he's starting this week. The guy we drafted, y'all remember Avery Williams starting in the slot as a rookie, as a nickel corner. He got a start and he was covering CeeDee Lamb against the Dallas Cowboys in 2021. In 2022, he was moved to running back. That's the type of defense of personnel that Dean Pease was working with his 2 years. No offense to Avery Williams, but he wasn't drafted to be a corner. He wasn't an All-American as a corner. He was a return man, and he did a really good job and was a big enough liability as a corner that he moved to running back. Let's get the ball in this guy's hands instead of asking him to cover CeeDee Lamb out there. So the personnel, we just whipped off 3 names off the top of my head: Mike Hughes, Clark Phillips, and Trey Flowers, as Ryan said. So there's depth there for a change, which is nice to have. Cortez Shannon says, good morning, Scott. Good morning to you as well. I feel like I skipped a couple people. I want to say hello to Raymond Collins. Good morning. And Brad Clark. Good morning to you as well. And 100 Realists. So thank you for coming in. And Brandon Swank has a question here. He says, what do you think Matt Schaub getting a job at the Falcons and helping Ritter and some of the rookies? What do I think of that? Okay. I'm not overly concerned with coaching once I really get below the coordinator positions. Your head coach and your coordinators, I feel good about. If I feel good about them, then I feel good about the coaching staff. After that, there's some unheralded guys that can become rising stars. Take a look at that 2016 Falcons coaching staff, and there's like 5 head coaches on it. So yes, it's important, but I don't know enough about Schaub as he's a terrific backup for a long time. He's learned a lot, but I don't know how that's going to translate to what he can do for Desmond Ritter and whatever else he's going to do on offense. So for Brandon, for me, it's just kind of a wait and see type of thing. Here's God Hand Presents with a nice optimistic question this morning. If the Falcons win the Super Bowl this year, would Cordarrelle Patterson be in consideration for the greatest Falcon of all time? No, he wouldn't. I can answer that one quickly. Let's say he was even MVP of the season. Would he be in contention for greatest Falcon of all time? No, he wouldn't have the longevity for that. And even from a talent perspective. So when you talk about like all-time all Falcons teams, there's 2 ways you can think of it. You can think of it as who's the best player to ever suit him up for the Falcons. That argument comes down to me between Deion Sanders and Julio Jones. Deion Sanders is not in contention for me for greatest Falcon of all time, because I think that means more than who was the greatest player, who was the best, most talented player on the field. It comes down to longevity. What did you mean to this franchise? That type of thing. And in my era, my vote still goes to, Jesse Tuggle. He was a long time Atlanta Falcon. He's my greatest Falcon of all time, my favorite Falcon. The hard times that he had to go through, and seeing him get to 1998 and having that 14-2 season and getting the recognition he deserved with multiple Pro Bowls and being an undrafted guy and what he had meant to this team. He's on my list. In this group of players, Grady Jarrett is on my list. Chris Lindstrom could end up on the list, but it's going to be guys. Jake Matthews is quietly, he's got the longest active starting streak in the NFL. Jake Matthews is going to be on some all-time Falcon list because of the longevity in his production. So no, Cordarrelle Patterson is one of my favorite Falcons to ever watch play, but no, not on that. And that just gave me a chance to name drop some guys who are some of my favorite Falcons of all time. Keith and Ellen Johnson saying excited about this group. I feel this is the first year that we're free from the old regime. And Miss Johnson, I've been pointing to 2023 since I learned how to read salary caps. It was just plainly obvious that the Falcons could not really compete in 2021 and 2022 based on the dead money that was going to be out there. And in the notes on ESPN Plus today, I think it was Fowler that had them. Let me see. It was Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler on ESPN Plus, and they did a great job with this. But he did a great job of writing this. This is why he's a writer and I'm not. He says around $90 million in dead money is buried somewhere in the IBM performance field, replaced by optimism and fiscal breathing room. Yes, indeed. 80-something million in dead money. And, I've seen the The Falcons still have 18 million in dead money. Kind of. So what they did last year with Deion Jones was they freed up cap space at the end of the year by getting rid of him, but that increased the dead number that they had this year. However, they were able to carry over that increase to the salary cap this year. So let's say if you cut Deion Jones and he had a $10 million dead cap money in dead cap, but if you had waited and cut him this year, it would have been 5. Well, why didn't you just leave him and then take the 5 million? Because they got 5 million back last year. So instead of a $200 million salary cap, they went to $205 million. So it evened itself out. So that 18 million in dead cap money isn't quite what it seems, because you got some money back from Deion Jones's contract last year that you could carry over to this year. So yeah, your dead cap number went up, but so did your salary cap. It evened itself out. So it's more like 12 million, 13 million in dead cap money. And compared to the 84 million it was last year, that's chump change. That's why, I think Marcus Mariota had a $2 million dead cap number. It was always a one-year deal. You can get rid of Matt Ryan and you take a $45-46 million dead cap hit. You think Marcus Mariota is going to be safe on 2? Hell no. And Bubba agrees. He says the DB situation was rough the last 2 years. How many times have you heard me say that the name Fabian Moreau over the last couple of seasons? You're running out there with Fabian Moreau as a starting corner and Avery Williams as a starting nickel back in 2021, and people wanted to get on Dean Pease with Steven Means at edge, and you're really gonna judge Dean Pease on those results? Come on, guys, let's be at least a little bit fair. Eric Parker says hi. Hello, Eric. Appreciate you coming in. And D'Angelo says again, what about helping the pass rushers get to the quarterback, please? Yeah. One of the notes that came out, and we're kind of hitting back and forth on some of these things, but one of the notes that came from those ESPN notes was the positive reviews on Caden Ellis. Now, y'all have heard me say before, and if you're new, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and to either the Facebook page where you're watching or the YouTube channel, so you can come back again and get those alerts. You've heard me say before that there's still not that alpha pass rush guy out there, that there might not be a guy that gets 15 sacks from this team. However, there could be 6 guys that get 6 or 7 sacks. And wouldn't 36 to 40 sacks sound a lot better than the 18 to 20 that the Falcons have put up the last couple of years? Almost doubling those numbers. Yeah, that'd be nice. You bring in David Onyemata, who had 5 or 6 last year. You had Caden Ellis, who had 7 last year in 11 games. You bring in Bud Dupree, who had a very good win rate last year. I improved the secondary, so I might have an extra half step in order for some of those Arnold Ebiketie pressures to become sacks. Yes, I expect the pass rush to get better. That said, I still think the number one missing piece on this team is that alpha edge, is that dominating passer. They're not easy to come by. How many of the Falcons had in their franchise history? Jonathan Abraham and half a season of Vic Beasley, maybe. 2016, he had a pretty good year. Man, that 1998 team had 4 guys up front that could get to the quarterback, and that's what made that defense, one of the big reasons that defense was so good. But yeah, this team still needs, it just hasn't worked out in free agency or the draft slot based on where you are picking and who was available. It just hasn't worked out to draft that big-time edge. Yes, Micah Parsons was there. Nobody knew who Micah Parsons was going to be that good. He was still considered an inside linebacker of sorts. If they did, he never would have made it where he went. I think he went around 11, possibly. He wouldn't have made it that far. He would have been a top 3 or 4 pick if anybody had any idea. If they knew exactly what they were getting, he might have gone number 2 behind Trevor Lawrence in that draft. So it just really hasn't worked out. The guy that they would have gone after this year, I believe, to keep an eye on, to say, yeah, that might have been the guy you should have taken, was Lucas Van Ness. So keep an eye on him in Green Bay. I think he was the only other edge guy that was under consideration. Tyreek Wilson was already gone. Will Anderson was already gone. And then you ended up getting, arguably the best player in the draft, and Bijan Robinson, which I thought was a very logical pick, if not one that says this is what analytics say you could do. Sometimes you got to go with a football move and not a pencil pushing geek move, like me. All right, let me see. We've got some opinions in here. As soon as I said that, this one was just kind of joking a little bit. As the CP is the greatest Falcon of all time, you gotta love the internet. Hey, listen, he could be your favorite player. He's one of my favorite players to ever suit up for the Atlanta Falcons, that's for sure. And Brad Clark votes for Dion as the greatest of all time. Like I said, I think he's the best player to ever play for the Atlanta Falcons. But if I'm putting up my Mount Rushmore of Atlanta Falcons, I'm not putting up a guy that was here for 4 years and really made his name even bigger, winning Super Bowls with the 49ers and Cowboys. Sorry, that's just me. Let me see here. Eric Parker asked, do you think we finally get respect from the league with our current roster? No, I do not. And that is a great question. Because the roster has been in place for the most part of the last, where are we now? August. It's been in place since the draft. So May, June, July. The roster itself has pretty much been in place for the last 3 months. The Falcons are still in the bottom third of about the highest I've seen them is like 24 of every power ranking out there. One of the coaches rankings I saw from NFL.com or ESPN had Arthur Smith at 29 behind 2 guys that had never coached a down in the NFL. So no, this roster isn't by itself going to get respect. Now, I know what you're saying here, though. Will this roster be enough to get the Falcons some respect? Yes, I think it will be. There's still going to be a national narrative that goes against the Atlanta Falcons until they go and win a little bit more consistently or go win a playoff game. Let's just read it back here. Mark it down in your calendars. August 7th, 9:30 in the morning. Scott Kennedy said they were going to say this. If they get off to like a 5-1 start, you'll start hearing some talk about the Atlanta Falcons, and you will hear just as much talk saying they have not played anybody yet. Look at their schedule. Of course, they're in the AFC, they're in the NFC South. They're playing the AFC South. They're playing the Arizona Cardinals. Their roster, they're doing a much better job, but they haven't played anybody. They're not for real. Just wait for that headline. Are the Atlanta Falcons for real? They haven't played anybody yet. It'll take a little bit of time, Eric. Do I think this roster is good enough to go to the playoffs, win 10, 11 games? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Let me see here. Greg Elrod asking, his 12 million drops after this year. Who are we talking about, Greg, on 12 million with salary caps? Apologies, I forgot. I'd be happy to talk some salary cap on here. Ryan says, you have it bad when freaking Cornell Armstrong is a starting cornerback. I'd have to look back at the roster and look at who all started, because he wasn't alone. There were several guys like that you're like, who's starting? That was a rough year. I was really impressed with how much better they got in the trenches with basically the same guys. That's coaching, man. And that's belief. From 21, where you had Jalen Mayfield and Caleb McGarry were just terrible. And then they imposed their will a little bit better on offensive line. And then Taquan Graham got really good before he hurt. And they got Abdullah Anderson, which I think was a steal. Played really good for the Falcons in 2022. Joe Gannon says, great morning, Scott. Good morning to you, Joe. Jasmine's here. Good morning, Jasmine. Appreciate you checking in here this morning. She's one of our Bronco crossover fans, but is in Atlanta. So she's all hot, muggy, and steamy weather down here as well with us, just enjoying it here too. Let me see here. Wanted to come down here and see if we could hit some of the questions in here. Let's check out Candler Price, because it has been a while. Candler says, hi, Scott. It's been a while. Talk about having a household name at pass rusher. Oh, we were in a prime spot in this year's draft and choosing a running back. And yes, I like Robinson, but you had Van Ness, Nolan Smith, and Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter's interior, so I don't consider him. And let's be clear here. That's who I would have taken in this spot, was Jalen Carter, unless someone handed me a packet from their private investigator that said, you don't want this guy on your team, period. Which that would surprise me a bit. If the Eagles are able to take him the very next pick, I would have probably taken Jalen Carter for longevity, for we talk about the cost benefit of a first round draft pick, a cost controlled rookie contract. If he's really good, he'll make 20. If Bijan Robinson's really good, he may make 10 in his second contract. We've got a couple cheat codes right now with Desmond Ridder on a rookie deal as a third round pick, and then Kyle Pitts and Drake London still on their rookie contracts. If they become what you're hoping they become, they're going to be $20 million players, and Ridder will double that here in the next 2-3 years. Van Ness was the one that was still in range, taken in that range. Nolan Smith fell so far back that I don't think he was really under consideration, Candler. So we'll see. I don't like using hindsight grades on a guy like Nolan Smith. Like I said, with Micah Parsons, would have in the hindsight, that's who you take. You take Micah Parsons. Come on. That's a hindsight grade. Lucas Van Ness was someone we were talking about making sense in that spot. Nolan maybe, but he fell so far that I think the media talk on him was a little bit higher than what the NFL proved to feel about him. And Jalen Carter, for me, wasn't an edge. He was an interior guy on that pass rush. But that was and yes, even if Bijan Robinson wasn't some of our favorite picks who we would have taken in that spot, it's still real easy to be excited about what Bijan Robinson is going to bring to this team. The guy's a playmaker. He's going to be a difference maker for this team. Wanted to talk about real quick about some of the guys that are no longer with the Atlanta Falcons. One of those guys was, and I titled it as a little bit of a surprise, and that was Felipe Franks. Felipe Franks was cut last week, and that surprised me a little bit because not that he was cut, but when he was cut. I expected him to at least make it to the 53-man roster cutdowns, and he was still cut when they're at 90. So that one surprised me a little bit. But it wasn't surprised me that he was cut because if my friend Jay Gribben is in here, he's got a soft spot for Felipe Franks, and he's asked about him before. And I said last year he wasn't playing much, and when I saw him go in, he totally screwed up and immediately went out. I'm like, this dude's done. That said, it won't surprise me to see him in a Falcons helmet again, at least on the practice squad. They've got a soft spot for this guy. Bring him back in the practice squad. I don't think there'll be a whole lot of competition for his signature. He's here, familiar. Wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being part of the 16-man practice squad after the 53-man cut down. So we'll see on that. They had an edge from Rice that was cut. I'm going to try not to butcher his name too bad. Ikenna Chukwu from Rice, and then Chris Blair, a wide receiver who was brought in for competition for the punt return and return game. May not have won that. And then an under-the-radar guy that went out, he was placed on IR, was Ethan Greenidge. That one's a little more concerning. I think he was considered one of your top backups for the offensive line spot. And you need those guys. You need 7 or 8 offensive linemen that are going to play. So that one hurt a little bit. The guys they brought in, they immediately then signed 4 XFL guys. That was kind of interesting. Michael Manet, 6'4", 305. He was a 3-year starter at center for Penn State. And he got a cup of coffee. Everybody drink. Cup of coffee. With the Green Bay Packers and Arizona Cardinals, but he did not appear in a game. They brought in Matthew Gotel, a 6'1", 340-pound defensive tackle. He played at West Florida. I didn't even know West Florida had a football team. And then he spent a little bit of time with the Seattle Seahawks. He had 23 tackles for and I love this name, the San Antonio Brahmas in the XFL. And then another guy to watch who spent a little bit more time with the Colts, practice squad, et cetera, was Kavion Patton, 6'2", 300-pound defensive lineman. He played 4 years at Texas State and had 180 tackles, and he was an all XFL defensive lineman. That could be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Matthew Sexton was a wide receiver at Eastern Michigan, and he had 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns in his 4-year career. And he has also spent some time with Kansas City Chiefs and Pittsburgh Steelers. So just a couple of guys to keep an eye on there. We are, and Craig says, when Franks was cut, there was much rejoicing. I think I said if I never see Felipe Franks on the field under center again, it'll be too soon. But an intriguing athlete, again, 6'6", 235 plus pounds, and can run. You know, did the Falcons miss out on by having him on the roster? So be it. I wish him well, and like I said, it wouldn't totally surprise me to see him back in the practice squad as a special teams type of depth piece possibly. But no, he didn't really latch on to the tight end spot either. Let me see. Ryan says Franks can go ahead and stay off the team. He has incredible size and some athleticism, but that's about it. Yeah, it didn't translate to the tight end position. There's a couple of guys that I've said that were just uber athletes, but really lack the instincts. And I said, put Taylor Mays was one of those guys. Boss Bailey was one of the other ones. A lot of y'all remember Boss Bailey. He was actually a better athlete than Champ, if that's possible, but they are brothers. It is possible because he was just as quick, had the same type of vertical leap, if not just a bit more. He was touching 50 inches on his vertical, working out here close to here in PG. I think they got him at 48. Sub 4.4 is 40, but he didn't have anywhere near the instincts that Champ did at corner. I'm like, well, put him at edge. Taylor Mays was the same way. 6'3", 225, 230 pound safety. No instincts at all, but so fast, so athletic. Man, put him at edge. Make him a designated pass rusher. If he can get a sack every game and finish with 17 sacks, they'll be putting him in all-pro games, and that's all he's got to do. You know what? I don't know. Felipe Franks, 6'6", 240 pounds, and can move a little bit. If you've got to have him on the team, block punts, something, I don't know. So, Ryan, I'm with you. It wouldn't surprise me if he's back on the practice squad, but his contributions or lack thereof are not going to be missed. But I wish him well. He's worked hard to stay on the roster and try and worked hard to try on the roster and earn a living. So wish him well. Harry Marshall Wood says Lucas Van Ness is a viable starter and Bijan could be an all-pro. Yeah, we'll see. You need more than a viable starter for, Lorenzo Carter is a viable starter. He's okay. He's fine. He's not a plus starter. He's okay. Lorenzo Carter. So if Lucas Van Ness doesn't become more than what Lorenzo Carter is, then Lucas Van Ness did not hit his value as a first-round draft pick. So that's how I would look at that one, Harry. We are going to get out of here pretty quickly. I guess the one last thing I wanted to, I say we as in, all of us, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Matt Ryan, it was good to see Matt Ryan back at Falcons training camp. I was afraid that there was a little bad blood after last year. He did ask for a trade after they kind of botched that whole Deshaun Watson thing. And part of me also thinks that was so Arthur Blank driven that there really wasn't any animosity between Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot, and Matt Ryan. And the other part of that is these seem to be genuinely good people. All four of the people I just mentioned. Arthur Blank is a good owner, a good person. Even if you do something that you disagree with, I could see them making amends. So it was good to see Matt Ryan back at camp, bringing his sons there. And, I think all of us, no matter what we thought of him as a quarterback, you stay long enough in one spot and don't win it all, there's going to be some questions and all that stuff. I think we're all pretty happy with how he represented the Atlanta Falcons and conducted himself while he was an Atlanta Falcon, and wish him well beyond Atlanta. On that note, let me see here. I'm going to hit Chris again real quick. He says, I want to see who steps up to be our wide receiver too. In the notes section and I think I agree with this based on what I've seen and read, but in the notes section from ESPN Plus from Jeremy Fowler and Graziano, it was Mac Hollins. They thought he could be the third leading receiver with outside of the running backs. But the big question came in was who ends up being the guy for the Falcons this year. And they're saying from what we're hearing and what we're seeing, it's going to end up being London. London's going to be the guy that ends up with the lion's share of the targets and yards and will lead this team in receiver. Pitt's number 2, obviously. But from a fantasy football perspective, keep an eye on Mac Hollins. He's having a good camp. One of the sleeper guys, talking about good play, players we liked having around and have been on the team a couple years but are on that bubble was Frank Darby. I had good things to say about Frank Darby. I think this wide receiver group is a little deeper than maybe we've given it credit for the names, because I've seen guys like Xavier Malone go in there and make good plays, and he's about WR10 right now, getting some time. I've seen Scotty Miller. I've seen Mac Hollins. We know what Drake London just looks like, a dude. He looks like the part. So I'm not worried about him. He looks like a legit number one. So I think the depth at wide receiver and the depth of playmakers, again, this offense is in really good shape depending on how Ritter plays. The pieces around Desmond Ritter are good. They're really good. And if Ritter doesn't play well this year, it should be an easy sell to a free agent quarterback. So if that's what it takes, and I don't know, most really good quarterbacks don't hit free agency is the problem with that type of strategy. But on that note, I think we're going to get out of here. I want to say thank you to everybody for coming in. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do, and leave me a comment after the fact. I'm all over the comment sections. I usually hit YouTube a little bit better than I do the other ones, just because YouTube makes it easier to see and respond to, but it's just youtube.com/Scott Kennedy. If you aren't watching, if you're watching it on Facebook, and I know a lot of you are, we've gotten a lot of new Facebook followers on Atlanta Falcons in the last month or so. We're probably up 1,500 to 2,000. So if you're new here, welcome in. If you're watching for the first time, we're here every Monday at 9 a.m. We're here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. And every once in a while, we sneak in a bonus episode. So make sure you're subscribing and following. Appreciate that. We will be back on Monday at 9 a.m. to talk a little bit of joint practices and preview the game against the Miami Dolphins. Yes, I said game. It's Monday. We're back to school. It's game week. It's football in the air. It feels like fall unless you step outside. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll see y'all on Wednesday.